The locker room reeked of sweat and shame, the air thick with the sting of whispered slurs. Ethan Harper, barely 17, stood frozen, his heart pounding like a drum as the word faggot echoed off the tiled walls, hurled by boys he'd known since kindergarten. By the time he fled, his face burned with humiliation, their laughter chasing him into the empty hallway of Lincoln High. It was 1998 in Willow Creek, a small town in Ohio where cornfields stretched wider than dreams and conformity was the unspoken law. Ethan, with his warm brown eyes and quiet demeanor, had always been the odd one out. Not because he wanted to be, but because he couldn't hide who he was. He'd known he was gay since he was 12, a secret he guarded like a fragile glass ornament. But today, it had shattered. Someone had seen him with Caleb, his best friend, their hands brushing too long onto the bleachers. Now the whole school knew. Ethan sprinted home, his sneakers slapping the cracked pavement. His chest heaved, not from running, but from the weight of betrayal. Caleb. The name felt like a knife. They'd promised each other secrecy, sworn to protect what was growing between them. A fragile, unspoken love that felt like sunlight after years of shadow. But Caleb had frozen when the jocks cornered them, his blue eyes wide with fear, saying nothing as Ethan took the brunt of their cruelty. Ethan didn't blame him, not entirely. Fear was a beast that could swallow even the bravest heart. At home, Ethan collapsed onto his bed, the springs creaking under his weight. His room was a sanctuary of mismatched posters. Nirvana, Star Wars, a faded map of the world he dreamed of escaping to. He pulled his knees to his chest, tried to hold himself together. His mother, Karen, a nurse with tired eyes and a heart too big for their small town, knocked softly. "Ethan, you okay, honey?" she called. He didn't answer. How could he explain the ache of being hated for something he couldn't change? Downstairs, Karen was cooking dinner, the smell of roasted chicken drifting up. Ethan's father, Tom, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a gruff voice, was still at the garage. They were good people, but Ethan hadn't told them. Not yet. He wasn't sure they'd understand. Not in a town where church sermons preached love but whispered condemnation. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the locker room scene. Jake Mitchell, the quarterback with a smirk sharp enough to cut, had led the pack. "You're disgusting, Harper," he'd spat. "Go cry to your boyfriend." Ethan's phone buzzed. A cheap flip phone his mom had gotten him for emergencies. A text from Caleb. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do." Ethan's thumb hovered over the reply button, but he snapped the phone shut. Sorry didn't erase the sting. Sorry didn't stop the rumors that would spread like wildfire by Monday. He needed to see Caleb to know if what they had was worth fighting for. The next day, Ethan biked to the lake, their secret spot. It was a quiet place hidden by tall reeds, where they'd spent summer nights talking about everything: music, dreams, the stars. Caleb was already there, sitting on the dock, his blonde hair catching the late afternoon light. He looked up, guilt etched into his face. "Ethan, he started, but Ethan cut him off. "Why didn't you say anything?" Ethan's voice cracked, raw with hurt. "You just stood there." Caleb's shoulders slumped. "I panicked. Jakey's my cousin. You know how he is. If I'd said something, it would have been worse for both of us. Worse than this." Ethan gestured to himself, his eyes red from sleeplessness. "They're tearing me apart, Caleb. And you let them." Caleb stood, stepping closer. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." His voice trembled, and for a moment, Ethan saw the boy he'd fallen for, the one who'd laughed with him under the stars, who'd held his hand when no one was looking. Caleb reached out, but Ethan stepped back. "I need to know you're with me," Ethan said. "Not just when it's easy." Caleb nodded, tears in his eyes. "I am. I swear I am." They sat on the dock, the silence heavy, but not empty. Ethan wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing, and theirs had cracked. The sun dipped low, painting the lake gold, and for a moment, they were just two boys, not the outcasts Willow Creek had labeled them. But Ethan knew Monday would bring more cruelty, more whispers. He wasn't sure he was strong enough to face it. That night, Ethan wrote in his journal, a habit he'd kept since he was a kid. They hate me for who I am, but I won't let them win. I can't. He didn't know how, but he'd find a way to survive this. For himself, for Caleb, for the part of him that still believed love was worth fighting for. Monday morning hit like a storm. Ethan walked into Lincoln High, his stomach churning as eyes followed him down the hall. The whispers were louder now, a buzzing swarm of judgment. "Freak," someone muttered. A group of girls giggled, their stares cutting deeper than words. Ethan kept his head down, clutching his backpack straps like a lifeline. He'd hoped the weekend would dull the rumors, but Willow Creek's gossip mill never slept. In English class, Ethan sat in the back, trying to disappear. Miss Carter, a young teacher with a kind smile, was discussing The Great Gatsby, but Ethan barely heard her. His eyes kept drifting to Caleb, who sat 3 rows away, staring at his desk. They hadn't spoken since the lake. Ethan wanted to believe Caleb's promise, but doubt gnawed at him. What if Caleb broke under pressure again? At lunch, Ethan avoided the cafeteria, heading instead to the library. It was quiet there, a refuge of dusty books and flickering fluorescent lights. He found a corner table and pulled out his journal, scribbling furiously. "I feel like I'm drowning. Everyone's watching, waiting for me to break." He wrote about Caleb, about the ache of wanting someone who might not be brave enough to stand with him. He wrote about the town, its suffocating smallness, and his dream of escaping to a city where he could be himself without fear. A shadow fell over the table. Ethan looked up to see Lily, a quiet girl with freckles and a penchant for sketching. She wasn't popular, but she wasn't cruel either. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. Ethan hesitated. "Not really." Lily sat down, uninvited but not unwelcome. "I heard what happened. It's not right what they're doing." She paused, fidgeting with her pencil. "My brother's gay. He left town after high school. Said it was the only way to breathe." Ethan's throat tightened. "Does it get better?" Lily shrugged. Her words stuck with Ethan for the rest of the day. Survive. He could do that. He had to. But survival felt impossible when Jake Mitchell and his crew cornered him after school by the bike racks. Jake towered over Ethan, his smirk a weapon. "Still here, Harper? Thought you'd run off with your boyfriend by now." Ethan's fist clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "Leave me alone, Jake." Jake laughed, shoving Ethan's shoulder. "Or what? You gonna cry?" The other boys snickered, egging him on. Ethan's heart raced, but he refused to back down. He thought of Lily's brother, of the promise of something better beyond Willow Creek. "Back off, Jake." Caleb's voice cut through the tension. Ethan turned, stunned, to see Caleb standing there, his jaw set. The boys froze, surprised. Jake's smirk faltered. "What, you're defending him now?" Jake said, stepping toward Caleb. "You're just as bad as he is." Caleb didn't flinch. "Maybe I am. So what?" The air crackled with silence. Jake's face twisted, but he didn't push further. With a scoff, he and his crew walked away, leaving Ethan and Caleb alone. Ethan's chest ached with a mix of relief and fear. Caleb had stood up for him, but at what cost? "You didn't have to do that," Ethan said quietly. "Yeah, I did," Caleb replied. "I'm done hiding." They walked to the lake, their steps slow, the weight of the day still heavy. Caleb reached for Ethan's hand, and this time, Ethan didn't pull away. The dock was empty, the water still. They sat, shoulders brushing, and talked. About fear, about courage, about what it meant to be seen. Ethan felt a spark of hope, fragile but real. Maybe they could face this together. But hope was a dangerous thing in Willow Creek. That night, Ethan found a note slipped under his door, scrawled in angry ink. "You don't belong here." His stomach dropped. This wasn't just schoolyard bullying anymore. Someone wanted him gone. The note haunted Ethan. He kept it hidden in his desk drawer, its words burning into his mind. "You don't belong here." It wasn't just a threat. It was a verdict, as if Willow Creek itself had rejected him. He didn't tell Caleb or his parents. He couldn't bear the thought of worrying them, or worse, proving the note right by crumbling under its weight. School became a battlefield. Ethan and Caleb stuck together, their bond a quiet rebellion against the glares and whispers. But the hostility grew sharper. Someone keyed the word queer into Ethan's locker. Anonymous notes appeared in his backpack, each one crueler than the last. Caleb faced his own share of venom. His cousin Jake made sure of that, spreading rumors that Caleb was confused and needed to be fixed. Ethan saw the toll it took on Caleb. The way his shoulders hunched, his laughter faded. But Caleb never backed down again, and that gave Ethan strength. One afternoon, Ethan's mom caught him staring at the ceiling, his journal open but untouched. "Ethan, talk to me," Karen said, sitting on his bed. Her voice was gentle but firm, the kind that could coax secrets from stone. Ethan hesitated, then let it spill. The locker room, the notes, the weight of being hated. He didn't mention Caleb, not yet, but he told her he was gay. Karen's eyes softened, but there was pain there too. "I wish you'd told me sooner," she said, pulling him into a hug. "You're my son, Ethan. Nothing changes that." She didn't promise it would be easy, and Ethan loved her for that honesty. When Tom came home, Karen told him, and though Tom was quiet, his calloused hand rested on Ethan's shoulder, a silent vow of support. But Willow Creek wasn't as forgiving. At a town fair, Ethan and Caleb walked together, careful not to touch, but their closeness drew stares. An older man from their church muttered something about sin as they passed. A group of Jake's friends threw soda cans at them, laughing as they ran off. Ethan's anger flared, but Caleb's hand on his arm kept him grounded. "They're not worth it," Caleb said, his voice steady despite the hurt in his eyes. That night, Ethan wrote in his journal, "I'm tired of being afraid. I want to fight back, but how?" The answer came unexpectedly in Ms. Carter's English class. She announced a school-wide essay contest, themed, "What Makes a Community?" The winner's essay would be read at the spring assembly, in front of the entire town. Ethan saw a chance, not just to speak, but to be heard. He poured his heart into the essay, writing late into the night. He wrote about love, about pain, about the courage it took to be yourself in a place that demanded conformity. He wrote about Caleb, though not by name, and the quiet moments that made the hate bearable. When he finished, he showed it to Lily, who read it with tears in her eyes. "This is powerful, Ethan," she said. "But are you sure you want to do this?" Ethan wasn't sure. Reading it aloud would mean exposing himself to the whole town, risking more than just whispers. But he was tired of hiding. He submitted the essay, his heart pounding as he dropped it into the contest box. Days later, Miss Carter called him to her desk. "Ethan, your essay, it's extraordinary," she said. "It's a finalist." Ethan's stomach flipped. A finalist meant his words could be heard, but also meant more eyes on him, more judgment. He told Caleb, expecting him to hesitate, but Caleb grinned. "Do it. Show them who you are." The night before the assembly, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat on the dock with Caleb, the lake reflecting a sky full of stars. "What if they hate me more?" Ethan asked. Caleb took his hand. "Then we'll face it together." For the first time, Ethan believed they could. The spring assembly was held in the school gymnasium, packed with students, teachers, and parents from Willow Creek. Ethan sat in the front row, his palms sweaty, his essay folded in his pocket. Caleb was beside him, their knees brushing, a small anchor in the sea of faces. The air buzzed with anticipation, but Ethan felt the weight of every stare, every whisper. Jake Mitchell sat a few rows back, his smirk a silent challenge. Miss Carter took the stage, her voice steady as she introduced the essay contest. "These students have shared what community means to them," she said. "Their words remind us of the strength in our differences." Ethan's name was called last, and his heart lurched. He stood, legs trembling, and walked to the podium. The gymnasium fell silent. Ethan unfolded his essay, his voice shaking at first but growing stronger with each word. "Community isn't just a place," he began. "It's the people who lift you up when the world tries to tear you down." He spoke of love, of fear, of the courage it took to be honest in a town that prized secrets. He didn't name Caleb, but his eyes found him in the crowd, and Caleb's nod gave him strength. As Ethan read, he saw faces shift, some softened, others hardened. He spoke of the pain of rejection, the sting of words like knives, and the hope that kept him going. "I'm gay," he said, the words ringing out clear and unapologetic. A gasp rippled through the crowd, but Ethan didn't stop. "And I'm not ashamed. I'm part of this community, whether you accept me or not." When he finished, the silence was deafening. Then, slowly, Lily stood and clapped. Caleb joined her, then Ms. Carter, then Ethan's parents. A few others followed, their applause tentative but real. Jake and his crew stayed seated, their faces unreadable. Ethan stepped down, his heart pounding, and Caleb pulled him into a hug. "You did it," Caleb whispered. But the victory was short-lived. That night, Ethan's bike tires were slashed. Another note appeared in his mailbox. "You'll regret this." Ethan's parents wanted to call the police, but Ethan refused. He didn't want to escalate things, not yet. Instead, he and Caleb made a plan. They'd keep going, keep being themselves, no matter what. The next week was a blur of tension. Some students avoided Ethan, others offered quiet support. A girl from his math class slipped him a note. "You're brave." "Thank you." It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him going. Caleb, too, faced backlash. His family was colder, his cousin relentless, but he stayed by Ethan's side. One evening, Ethan and Caleb were at the lake when they heard footsteps. Jake and two of his friends emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted with anger. "You think you could just flaunt it?" Jake snarled. "This town doesn't want you." Ethan stood, his heart racing, but his voice steady. "Maybe not, but I'm not leaving." Jake stepped closer, fists clenched, but Caleb moved in front of Ethan. "You touch him, you deal with me," Caleb said, his voice low but fierce. For a moment, it seemed like a fight would break out, but Jake's friends pulled him back, muttering about it not being worth it. They left, but the threat lingered. Ethan and Caleb sat on the dock, shaken but unbroken. "We can't stay here forever," Ethan said, staring at the water. "Not like this." Caleb nodded. "Then we'll leave. Together." The idea of leaving Willow Creek felt like a dream, but it was a dream they could chase. Ethan wrote in his journal that night, "I'm scared, but I'm not alone." That's enough for now. Graduation was 2 months away, and Ethan and Caleb clung to the promise of escape. They made plans: college in Chicago, a city where they could blend into the crowd, where love didn't have to be a secret. But Willow Creek wasn't done with them. The notes kept coming, each one uglier than the last. Ethan's parents installed a security camera, but it didn't stop the vandalism. A broken window, spray paint on their mailbox. Ethan felt the town closing in, but he refused to let it win. One day, Miss Carter called Ethan and Caleb to her classroom. "I've been watching you too," she said. "You're stronger than this town knows." She handed them a flyer for a scholarship for students who'd faced adversity. "Apply. Get out of here. You deserve better." They did. Ethan poured his heart into the application, writing about resilience, about love as an act of defiance. Caleb wrote about loyalty, about finding courage in the face of fear. They mailed their applications together, standing at the post office with hope flickering between them. The night before graduation, Ethan found another note on his doorstep. He braced himself, expecting hate, but instead, it was an apology. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. Jake." Ethan stared at the words, disbelief warring with hope. He didn't trust it, not fully, but it was a crack in the wall of hate. At the graduation ceremony, Ethan and Caleb sat side by side, their caps tilted at the same angle. When Ethan's name was called, he walked across the stage, his head high. A few boos rang out, but they were drowned by applause. Lily's, Ms. Carter's, his parents. Caleb's name followed, and Ethan cheered louder than anyone. After the ceremony, Ethan left a single note on the school's bulletin board, where everyone would see it. It was simple, written in his steady hand. I am enough. So are you. He didn't sign it, but he didn't need to. The words were his legacy, a quiet challenge to Willow Creek. The next day, Ethan and Caleb packed their bags. They'd both gotten a scholarship, a ticket to Chicago, and a new life. As they drove out of town, the lake sparkled in the rearview mirror, a reminder of the moments that had kept them whole. Ethan reached for Caleb's hand, and Caleb squeezed back. Years later, Ethan heard from Lily that the note had stayed on the bulletin board all summer. Students had added their own messages beneath it, words of hope, of apology, of change. Some said it made them cry, not out of sadness, but because it reminded them what a community could be. Ethan and Caleb never returned to Willow Creek, but they carried its lessons with them. They'd been rejected, humiliated, but they'd also been loved by each other, by the few who saw them for who they were. And that was enough. In Chicago, they built a life. They laughed, they fought, they grew. Ethan became a writer, his stories filled with the pain and beauty of being human. Caleb studied art, his paintings vibrant with the colors of their journey. They never forgot Willow Creek, but they never let it define them. Their love, once a secret, became their strength, a testament to the power of being seen, being heard, being enough.